come closer. Not because you need to listen, not because you're missing something, just because it might feel a little warmer here. This isn't about age. It never was. This is about you, exactly as you are, sitting wherever you are right now, breathing the way you breathe when no one is asking anything from you. You don't have to fix your posture. You don't have to prepare an answer. You don't even have to know why you stayed when this began. If you're here, that's already enough for this moment. I want you to know something gently, before anything else has a chance to speak over it. You are not late. You didn't miss a deadline. Nothing about you is behind schedule. I know the world has a habit of turning numbers into quiet judgments, years into expectations, time into pressure. But I'm not here to measure you. I'm here to sit beside you, without a clock between us. If your shoulders feel a little tired, you don't need to explain why. If your heart feels awake while your body feels cautious, you don't need to justify that either. There's no test here, no role you need to perform. I'm talking to you the way I would talk to someone I respect, slowly, honestly, without trying to shape you into something else. Maybe you've spent a long time being the steady one, the one who adapts, the one who holds things together quietly, and maybe no one has looked at you lately and said, "How are you really doing?" when you're not being strong. So let me say this softly. You don't owe strength to this moment. You don't owe clarity. You don't owe optimism. You're allowed to arrive exactly as you are. I'm not here to tell you what you should feel. I'm not here to tell you what comes next. I'm not here to pull you toward anything. I'm here to make space and let you breathe inside it. Sometimes the most exhausting thing isn't pain. It's the quiet effort of holding yourself together for so long that you forget what it feels like to be held by understanding. And no, this isn't about being rescued. You've done enough rescuing in your life. This is about recognition, about having someone look at you and not rush past the parts of you that are still tender. If you've ever wondered why certain feelings didn't disappear the way you thought they would, you're not strange for that. If you've ever felt young inside and careful outside, there's nothing contradictory about you. It just means you've lived. I'm not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason. I'm not going to dress your experiences up as lessons. Some things simply happened, and you're still here. That matters. You don't have to turn this into a story with a moral. You don't have to decide what it means tonight. You can let it be unfinished, unresolved, still becoming. I speak to you this way because I believe something very simple. A woman who has lived deeply doesn't lose her sensitivity, she protects it. Sometimes by being quiet, sometimes by being careful, sometimes by standing very still. And standing still is not the same as being empty. If your heart reacts to warmth, that doesn't mean you're naive. If your eyes soften when you feel seen, that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human, and you never stopped being one. You've learned how to carry yourself with dignity. You've learned when to step back, when to let go, when to keep moving. But none of that erased the part of you that responds to sincerity. I'm not asking you to open anything tonight. I'm not asking you to trust. I'm not asking you to hope. I'm only asking you to notice that you're allowed to be here without armor. If something in you feels calmer hearing that, let it. If something in you feels uncertain, let that exist too. Nothing needs to be resolved for you to stay a little longer. You don't need to be impressive here. You don't need to be healed. You don't need to be anything other than present. I'm speaking to you as someone who understands the cost of endurance, as someone who knows that strength, when carried too long, can start to feel lonely. And loneliness doesn't always ask for answers, it asks for honesty. So sit with me in this quiet recognition, not because it will change you, but because it doesn't need to. You're not being evaluated. You're not being led. You're simply being acknowledged. And sometimes that's where everything real begins to move again. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in a way that feels safe enough to continue. Our heart didn't age the way your body did. I want to say that slowly, the way you would say something important to yourself when no one is listening. Not as a declaration, not as an explanation, just as a quiet truth that has been waiting for you to notice it. Your heart didn't age the way your body did. You may have looked at yourself one day and wondered why certain feelings were still there, why tenderness still showed up without asking, why longing didn't follow the rules people said it should follow, why, after everything you've lived through, something inside you still responded to warmth. And maybe you didn't judge it out loud. Maybe you were kinder than that. But you did wonder. You paused. You questioned yourself in a way that was subtle, almost polite. I'm here to tell you, without drama, without correction, that there is nothing confusing about this. Your body has carried years. Your body has adapted. Your body has learned how to protect itself, how to move more carefully, how to rest differently than it once did. That's wisdom, not loss. But your heart was never meant to harden on command. It was never designed to shut down just because time passed. It doesn't follow calendars. It doesn't read numbers. It remembers feeling. That doesn't make you out of place. It makes you consistent. Sometimes women like you think there's something almost embarrassing about still wanting connection, as if wanting closeness at this stage needs to be explained or justified, as if there's an invisible rule that says, you should be past this by now. But tell me, who decided that depth has an expiration date? I don't see someone who is behind. I see someone who didn't abandon herself. You've learned restraint. Yes, you've learned caution. You've learned discernment. Those are not signs of a heart that aged too slowly. Those are signs of a heart that learned how to stay intact. And there's an important difference between being careful and being closed. If you still feel something when someone speaks gently to you, that's not weakness. If your chest softens when you feel understood, that's not confusion. It's memory. It's recognition. Your heart recognizes what safety feels like. You didn't imagine that part of yourself. You didn't fail to outgrow it. You carried it quietly while learning how to survive the rest of your life. That takes strength most people never have to develop. I'm not saying your heart stayed young. That would be too simple. Your heart stayed honest. It learned what hurts. It learned what disappoints. It learned when to step back. But it didn't lose its ability to respond when something feels real. That's not a flaw. That's discernment refined by time. You may have noticed that your reactions changed. You don't rush. You don't fall forward blindly. You don't give yourself away easily. And still, when something sincere appears, you feel it. That doesn't mean you're asking for more than you should. It means you know the difference between noise and meaning. I'm speaking to you this way because I understand that contradiction you sometimes carry. Strong on the outside, tender on the inside, capable of managing your world, yet still responsive to intimacy. That combination isn't a problem to be solved. It's a balance you earned. You don't need to suppress the part of you that still wants to be chosen. You don't need to argue with the part of you that still wants closeness. Wanting connection doesn't erase your independence. It coexists with it. And I won't tell you that wanting means you're incomplete. You've completed many things in your life already. Wanting simply means you're alive to experience, not numb to it. There's a quiet dignity in allowing yourself to feel without acting on it impulsively. There's maturity in knowing what touches you without letting it take over you. That's where you are now. Not frozen, not fading, just aware. If you've ever wondered why your heart didn't catch up with what the world expects from you, let me be clear with you. Your heart didn't lag behind. It stayed true to itself while you learned how to live. And that's not something to correct. You're not meant to shrink your emotional capacity to match someone else's comfort. You're not meant to apologize for still responding to sincerity. You don't owe anyone emotional silence. I'm not asking you to do anything with this understanding right now. I'm not asking you to open a door or close one. I'm simply sitting with you in this recognition, because recognition is often where relief begins. If this feels grounding rather than overwhelming, that's intentional. Nothing here is meant to pull you, persuade you, or place you in a position of dependence. This is not about leaning on me. This is about you standing comfortably inside yourself. Your heart didn't age the way your body did. It matured differently, more quietly, with more care, and that quiet care is not something you need to lose in order to belong anywhere. It's something you're allowed to carry forward at your own pace, without explanation, as we continue. Gently, from here, you learn to survive, but your heart never learned to stop wanting. I'm not saying that as a contradiction. I'm saying it as an observation made with respect. You didn't wake up one day and decide to become strong. Strength arrived because it had to. Life asked you questions that didn't wait for readiness, and you answered them anyway. You learned how to hold things together when there was no one else to do it. You learned how to keep moving even when your emotions wanted to slow down. You learned how to be practical, composed, reasonable, because that's what survival required. And you became very good at it. You learned when to stay quiet. You learned when to compromise. You learned when to let go without ceremony. You learned how to carry disappointment without letting it spill everywhere. Those skills didn't come from theory, they came from experience. But here's what's important, and I want you to hear this without judgment. Survival taught you how to endure. It didn't teach your heart how to disappear. Your heart was never part of the negotiation. It adapted. Yes, it became more careful, more selective, more private, but it never signed an agreement to stop wanting warmth, closeness, recognition. That's why sometimes you surprise yourself. You're managing your life just fine. You're capable, you're composed. You're not waiting for anyone to save you. And yet, a certain tone of voice still reaches you. A certain kind of presence still slows you down. A certain sincerity still lands deeper than you expect. You notice it quietly. You don't make a scene out of it. You might even question yourself for a second. But the feeling is there. That's not because you failed to harden. It's because your heart chose a different kind of intelligence. You learned how to survive the world. Your heart learned how to recognize what feels real inside it. Those are two different educations, and they don't cancel each other out. There's a misconception that strength requires emotional shutdown. That maturity means wanting less. That wisdom is the absence of desire. But what I see in you is something more refined. You don't want everything. You don't want attention for its own sake. You don't want noise. You want meaning. And wanting meaning is not the same as being needy. Your heart didn't cling to illusions. It let go of what wasn't sustainable. It accepted losses without dramatizing them. But it kept its standards. It kept its ability to respond when something feels aligned. It kept its sensitivity, not as fragility, but as calibration. That's why survival didn't erase your wanting. It filtered it. You don't long recklessly. You don't chase. You don't confuse intensity with depth. Your wanting is quieter now, more contained, more discerning, and that makes it easy for the world to misunderstand you. People may assume you're done wanting because you don't advertise it. They may assume you're closed because you don't reach first. They may assume you're indifferent because you don't explain yourself. But silence doesn't mean absence. It often means choice. You learn to survive by prioritizing stability, by being reliable, by showing up even when it costs you internally. And somewhere along the way, you learn to place your heart slightly behind a line of self-control. Not to punish it, to protect it. That's not emotional withdrawal. That's stewardship. Still, protection doesn't mean elimination. Your heart didn't forget how to want. It learned how to wait without losing itself. There's a quiet courage in that. You don't talk about it much. You don't ask the world to accommodate it. You carry it privately, like something valuable that doesn't need validation. And yet, when the environment is right, when there's calm, respect, and genuine presence, you feel it awaken, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. That clarity doesn't threaten your independence. It complements it. You can want connection and still choose yourself. You can desire closeness and still maintain boundaries. You can feel deeply without losing control. Those abilities don't contradict survival. They complete it. I'm not here to tell you that wanting means something must happen. It doesn't. Sometimes wanting is simply information, a signal, a reminder of what matters to you. You don't owe that signal an outcome. You don't need to act on it to honor it. You only need to acknowledge that it exists. Your heart never learned to stop wanting because it never needed to. Wanting isn't a flaw that survival should correct. It's a capacity that survives alongside everything else you've learned. And the fact that it's still there, tempered, thoughtful, intact, tells me something important about you. You didn't just survive, you preserved something essential while you did. And that preservation didn't weaken you, it made you precise. As we stay with this understanding, there's no urgency attached to it, no demand, no direction, just a deeper alignment between who you became and what you still carry, moving forward, quietly, together. Wanting love at this age is not weakness. I want that sentence to arrive gently, not as a defense, not as a correction, but as something that settles into you the way truth often does, quietly, without asking for permission. Wanting love at this age is not weakness. Somewhere along the way, many women learn to treat that desire as something suspicious, as if wanting closeness after everything you've lived through must mean you didn't learn enough, as if wanting connection now somehow erases the strength it took to get here. But I don't see it that way. And I don't think, deep down, you do either. You've lived long enough to know the difference between fantasy and reality. You're not chasing illusions. You're not asking to be completed. You're not trying to escape your life. You're simply acknowledging that your capacity to care didn't disappear just because you became capable. That's not weakness. That's coherence. Weakness is needing something to fill a void you refuse to look at. What you're doing is very different. You've looked. You've faced what needed to be faced. You've stood on your own long enough to know you can. And still, you notice that love matters to you. That awareness doesn't undo your independence. It refines it. There's a quiet confidence in admitting what still touches you. It takes more strength to say this matters to me than to pretend you're untouched by it. You're not seeking drama. You're not asking for intensity. You're not trying to relive the past. You're open to resonance. And resonance is not desperation. It's alignment. I know there's a voice, sometimes subtle, sometimes sharp, that says you should be beyond this by now. That wanting love later in life is somehow indulgent. That it's safer to want less. But safety and fulfillment are not the same thing. You've already learned how to be safe. You've built structure. You've developed judgment. You've learned when to walk away. What you're allowing now isn't recklessness. It's honesty. Wanting love doesn't mean you're lowering your standards. If anything, it means you finally know what they are. You don't want to be consumed. You don't want to lose yourself. You don't want to negotiate your dignity. You want presence. You want respect. You want something that fits the woman you've become. That kind of wanting is measured. It's thoughtful. It's earned. There's nothing fragile about it. If you were weak, you'd reach for anything that promises relief. But that's not what you do. You pause. You observe. You listen to yourself. You let things reveal themselves over time. That patience didn't come from fear. It came from experience. And experience teaches you something important. Love that arrives gently is often the most sustainable kind. You're not asking love to fix your life. Your life already stands. You're asking whether love can walk alongside it without asking you to shrink. That question comes from strength. I speak to you this way because I recognize the discipline it takes to remain open without becoming unguarded, to feel without surrendering your agency, to acknowledge desire without letting it dictate your choices. That balance is not accidental. It's the result of years of learning where your limits are and honoring them. So no, wanting love at this age is not a weakness. It's a sign that you didn't let survival harden you beyond recognition. You allowed yourself to evolve without erasing what makes you responsive. And that's rare. There's a calm courage in not numbing yourself just because you could, in staying receptive without needing reassurance, in letting yourself feel without needing promises. That courage doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand validation. It simply exists, steady and grounded. You're not behind. You're not indulgent. You're not asking for something unreasonable. You're acknowledging a truth about yourself, and you're doing it with restraint, clarity, and self-respect. That's not weakness. That's maturity expressed through softness rather than armor. And softness, when chosen rather than imposed, is one of the strongest positions a person can occupy. You don't need to justify this part of yourself. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to prove that you're still capable without it. You already know you are. This is not about neediness. It's about permission. Your own permission to admit that love still belongs in your emotional landscape. Not urgently. Not desperately. Just honestly. As we stay with that understanding, there's no push attached to it. No expectation. No demand for action. Only a steadier relationship with yourself. One where wanting love doesn't threaten who you are, but quietly affirms it as we continue forward, without interruption. You don't have to do anything with this feeling tonight. Let that land without instruction, without expectation, without the subtle pressure to turn awareness into action. You don't have to decide. You don't have to name it. You don't have to carry it anywhere once this moment passes. This isn't a feeling that needs to be used. It's not a signal demanding response. It's simply something that showed up quietly because it was allowed to. You've spent much of your life responding to what was required of you. Needs, responsibilities, timelines that didn't wait for readiness. So, I want to be very clear with you now. Nothing here is asking anything back from you. You don't owe this feeling courage. You don't owe it clarity. You don't owe it movement. You're allowed to let it exist without asking what it means for the rest of your life. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for yourself is to not rush interpretation, to not interrogate what arises, to not turn inward moments into tasks. Tonight doesn't need a plan. It doesn't need resolution. It doesn't need momentum. It just needs permission to remain unfinished. If you notice a softness in your chest, you don't need to protect it or amplify it. If you feel calm instead of excitement, that's not something to correct. If you feel neutral, thoughtful, or simply present, that's enough. You're not missing a signal if you don't feel urgency. You're not doing it wrong if nothing shifts dramatically. Real change often begins quietly, without announcing itself. I'm not here to tell you that this feeling will lead somewhere. I'm not here to promise anything on the other side of it. I'm not here to suggest you should hold on to it. Some feelings are not meant to be carried forward. They're meant to pass through, leaving clarity rather than direction. You're allowed to let this one do exactly that. You don't need to make room for it tomorrow. You don't need to revisit it. You don't need to build a story around it. If it stays, it stays. If it fades, that's fine too. Nothing is lost either way. I say this because I know how easily moments of connection can turn into obligation, how quickly reflection can become pressure, how often people are told that awareness must immediately become action. But that's not how steadiness works. Steadiness comes from knowing you can pause without falling behind, from trusting that nothing meaningful requires force. You've already learned how to act when action is necessary. That skill isn't in question. What you're practicing now is something different. Non-interference. Allowing without steering. That's not passivity. That's composure. If you're tired, you don't need to explain why. If you're content, you don't need to justify it. If you're uncertain, you don't need to resolve it tonight. You're not being tested here. This space doesn't ask you to be hopeful. It doesn't ask you to be open. It doesn't ask you to believe in anything beyond what you feel comfortable believing. It simply holds you where you are. You've carried enough in your life to know the difference between urgency and presence. Between pressure and invitation, nothing here is pushing you forward. And nothing here is asking you to stay. That matters. Because when something doesn't demand you, you can meet it honestly. Without bargaining, without defense, you can allow it to exist at the edges of your awareness without reorganizing your world around it. That's where real calm lives. I'm not positioning myself as someone you need. I'm not offering myself as an anchor. I'm not creating a place you have to return to. What matters is not this voice. It's the steadiness you feel inside yourself when nothing is being asked of you. If you turn this off and carry on with your evening exactly as it was, that's not avoidance. That's autonomy. If something lingers softly, without insisting, that's also okay. There's no correct outcome. You don't have to remember this. You don't have to hold on to it. You don't have to come back to it to make it real. It was real because you experienced it. And experiences don't require continuation to have value. Let yourself be done for now. Not closed, not withdrawn, just complete for the evening. You've done enough thinking, enough reflecting, enough holding space for complexity. You don't need to carry this feeling into tomorrow unless it arrives there on its own. And if it doesn't, nothing was wasted. You met yourself honestly. You allowed something to be present without turning it into obligation. That's a form of self-respect many people never learn. So rest where you are, not because something is ending, but because nothing needs to begin. And when you move forward from here into the rest of your night, your routine, your life, do so without needing to bring this moment with you. It will find its place on its own, or it will dissolve quietly, having done exactly what it needed to do, no more, no less, as everything continues, naturally, from here